The Aurora Dawn glided through the black space like a silver arrow. Its mission was clear: reach Valaris Prime, meet the royal family, and open peaceful relations between humans and the Valerians. Commander Paul stood near the large viewing window, watching the green-blue world grow larger. He had seen many planets before, but this one seemed alive in a way he could not explain. The seas shimmered in shades of blue, green, and gold. Clouds twisted in perfect spirals as if the wind was painting them on purpose. Approaching landing. "Coordinates," said the ship's pilot, Mira. Paul nodded. "Let's make this first meeting count." The Valerians had contacted Earth only 6 months ago. Their messages spoke of harmony, empathy, and unity. They could sense emotions from others, like reading words on a page. Paul had been told to be respectful but also careful. No one knew exactly how Valerians would react to humans. When the ship touched down on the landing platform of the royal city, a group of tall figures waited. Their skin carried a soft silver glow under the sunlight. They wore long, flowing robes, and crystal bands circled their wrists. At the center stood Princess Alira. She was taller than Paul, with bright silver eyes that seemed to hold light inside them. Her long hair fell like a river over her shoulders. Her smile was calm, yet there was something searching in her gaze. "Welcome, Commander Paul of Earth," she said, her voice soft but carrying across the platform. "I am Princess Alira of Valaris Prime. We are honored to meet one from a distant star." Paul bowed slightly. "It is an honor to be here, Your Highness. On behalf of Earth, I thank you for your welcome." The Valerian guards moved aside, allowing Alira to step closer. She raised her hand, her palm open toward him. Paul had been told that Valerians greeted each other by lightly touching and sharing a wave of emotion. He stood still as she reached out. Her fingertips came near his hand. But then she stopped. A shadow crossed her face. "I cannot feel you," she said softly. Paul blinked. "Feel me?" She lowered her hand. "Your people were described as warm, vibrant. We Valerians can sense the emotions of all living beings. It is our way to know if someone is truthful, if they carry joy, fear, or sadness. Yet, from you, there is nothing." The courtiers behind her began whispering in their melodic language. Paul could tell it was not a normal reaction. "I assure you," Paul said calmly, "I mean no harm. Perhaps our minds work differently." Alira studied him for a long moment. "Perhaps. Still, it is strange. I have never stood before a being whose emotions I could not feel." She turned toward the city and gestured for him to follow. "Come. You will stay in the royal guest wing. Valaris will show you its beauty." They walked through the streets of the capital. Towers made of white stone rose high, their surfaces shining like water under sunlight. Gardens floated in the air, held by unseen forces, with flowers that changed color as one walked by. Children laughed while chasing tiny crystal-winged creatures in the plazas. As they walked, Paul noticed the way Valerians greeted each other. A hand on the arm, a short pause, and then smiles. Each exchange seemed to be more than words. He wondered what it was like to live in a world where everyone could feel the emotions of everyone else. When they reached the palace gates, 2 massive doors opened silently. Inside, the air was warm and carried a scent like rain after a summer storm. The halls were lined with long tapestries, showing scenes of peace treaties, harvest celebrations, and starships lifting into the sky. Alira led him to a balcony overlooking the city. "This is Valaris," she said. "For centuries, we have lived without war. We understand each other's hearts. That is our gift." She paused and glanced at him again. "But with you, it is like standing before a wall. I cannot see through it. I cannot hear what your heart says." Paul met her gaze. On Earth, we cannot read each other's hearts in the same way. We learn through words, actions, and trust built over time. Perhaps that is why I seem different to you. Alira tilted her head slightly, as if trying to understand a strange puzzle. Perhaps. But without feeling, how do you know someone is true? We don't, Paul said simply. We take the risk. That is part of life for us. The princess looked back toward the city, her expression thoughtful. Behind them, the soft sound of court musicians filled the air. Yet Paul could sense the small tension in the space between them, like an invisible thread pulled too tight. As evening came, the sky above Valaris turned deep violet, and the three-colored seas reflected the fading light. Paul stood alone on the balcony after Alira left, wondering what her words truly meant. If her people relied on sensing emotions, what would happen if more humans came here? Far below, the city lights began to glow like constellations on the ground. Paul had a feeling this first meeting was only the beginning of something much larger, something that could test not just him, but the connection between two worlds. The morning sun rose over Valaris Prime, casting gold and silver light across the palace gardens. Commander Paul stepped out of his guest chamber and saw the strange beauty of the city from above. Floating bridges connected the palace towers, and streams of water curved in the air like ribbons, moving without any pipes or channels. A palace guide named Bren, an elderly Valerian scholar, approached with a polite bow. "The princess requests that I share some of our history with you." "Commander," Bren said. His voice carried a calm, gentle tone, but his bright eyes studied Paul with curiosity. Paul walked beside Bren through the gardens. The air was fresh, carrying the scent of glowing flowers that opened slowly in the morning light. "You must understand," Bren began. "Our people have never known a mind like yours. Every being we meet shares emotion with us naturally. It is as easy as breathing. When the princess could not feel you, it became a matter of deep interest and concern." Paul nodded. "She told me about this. Humans do not share emotions in that way. We communicate through words and expressions." Bren looked thoughtful. "It may be more than that. Your kind may have what we call a mind shield. Some ancient writings speak of beings whose thoughts and feelings are hidden not by choice but by nature. Such a mind is difficult for us to trust because we cannot see its truth. They passed a pond where silver fish moved in patterns that made ripples look like painted circles." Paul could tell Bren was choosing his words carefully. "You mean," Paul said slowly, "you think my people might be dangerous because you can't read us?" Bren gave a small sigh. "Not dangerous by intention, perhaps, but unpredictable. Valerians live by harmony. Our empathy is our guide. Without it, we are blind to the nature of another." Paul understood the problem. Without their special ability, Valerians would have to judge others like humans did, through action, reputation, and spoken promises. To them, that must feel uncertain. Later that day, Princess Alira invited Paul to walk with her through the royal gardens. The paths curved around giant crystal trees whose branches shimmered in the breeze. Each leaf seemed to hold a drop of light inside it. "I have been thinking about what you said last night," Alira began. "You spoke of trust built over time. I do not know if my people are ready for such a thing. We are used to knowing the truth the moment we meet someone." Paul smiled slightly. "Where I come from, we cannot know the truth at first sight. We learn by spending time together. We make mistakes, we ask questions, we choose who to believe. It's slower, but it can be strong." Alira stopped near a fountain shaped like a spiral shell. "But if your way fails, it can cause harm." "It can," Paul admitted, "but it also allows us to choose trust freely. It's not automatic, it's earned." She studied him for a moment, her silver eyes narrowing slightly as if she were trying to see something hidden. "I have never had to earn trust before. It is given instantly here. Perhaps that is why this feels so strange." They continued walking, passing groups of Valerians who bowed respectfully to the princess. Yet Paul noticed that some looked at him longer than necessary, their expressions holding quiet doubt. Word had clearly spread about the human who could not be felt. In the afternoon, Bren took Paul to the Hall of Records. The chamber was vast, with shelves made of living wood that twisted upward toward the high glass ceiling. Light filtered through crystal panels, making soft rainbows on the floor. "This is where we keep all knowledge of Valaris," Bren said. "From the first days of our people to the present." Paul ran his fingers lightly along the smooth surface of one of the crystal tablets. "Do you have records of other species you've met?" Bren nodded. "Yes, and in all those encounters, there has never been a people entirely hidden from our empathy. You are the first." Paul raised an eyebrow. "Then this mind shield could be unique to humans?" "Possibly. Or perhaps it is rare, and we have not met others like you." Bren's voice grew more serious. "Some among the council believe a shielded mind could be a danger. They think such beings could lie, hide intentions, or act without warning." Paul thought about that as they left the Hall of Records. The Valerians had lived in peace for so long, relying on their natural ability to sense emotions. Without it, their world might feel uncertain, maybe even unsafe. That evening, Alira invited Paul to a small dinner in one of the palace's high terraces. The sky was a deep shade of blue, and the three-colored sea shimmered far below. Lanterns shaped like soft glowing orbs floated above the table, moving slowly in the warm breeze. As they ate, Alira asked about Earth. Paul told her about the variety of human cultures, the different ways people made peace or solved conflicts, and the fact that sometimes, despite differences, people could become strong allies. "You speak of choice often," Alira said. "Choice in trust, choice in peace, choice in friendship. That is different from us. Our empathy guides us toward those who are true and away from those who are false. We rarely choose. We simply know." "Then maybe that's why I'm here," Paul said. "To show you another way, a way that might be useful even if your gift fails you." Alira tilted her head. "Fails us? That is not possible." Paul didn't answer right away. He looked out at the glowing sea. "Nothing is perfect forever. There may come a time when you cannot rely on your gift. If that happens, you will need another way to judge others." The princess grew quiet at that, her silver eyes reflecting the lantern light. For the first time since they met, Paul thought she might be truly considering his words. Far below, the sound of the sea reached them, soft and steady. The night air was warm, but there was a faint tension in the space between them, an unspoken question that neither was ready to answer. The days following Paul's arrival passed quickly, yet an invisible weight began to hang over the palace. At first, the Valerian people had shown polite curiosity toward the human visitor, but now their glances carried something different: hesitation, even suspicion. In the marketplace below the palace, whispers spread. "He cannot be read," some said. "What if he hides anger? What if he hides danger?" Others defended him, saying he had spoken respectfully and shown no signs of harm. But in a city where truth had always been felt instantly, the idea of someone unreadable was unsettling. Princess Alira noticed the change too. One morning, she walked through the gardens with Paul and saw groups of courtiers watching from a distance. She lowered her voice. "They think you are hiding something. They do not understand how you can live without sharing emotion." Paul sighed. "On Earth, we face this all the time. We meet strangers and have to decide who to trust without knowing for sure. It's not easy, but it's normal for us." "That may be so for humans," Alira said. "But here, It is like asking someone to walk in darkness when they have always known light. They reached a shaded terrace where a fountain's water spiraled upward before falling back in soft streams. Paul rested his hands on the railing. Then maybe this is your chance to learn how to walk in that darkness, even if only a little. Alira gave a faint smile, but it quickly faded. Convincing the council of that will be difficult. They believe peace comes from our empathy. To them, losing it even for one person is like losing part of their sight. Later that day, the council gathered in the high chamber of the palace. The room's ceiling was carved with silver patterns that glowed faintly. 10 council members sat in a half-circle, their long robes flowing like waves. Paul stood beside Alira as Bren introduced him. 1. Counselor, a tall Valerian named Soren, spoke first. Commander Paul of Earth, we have welcomed you with open hands, yet you remain closed to us. We cannot feel your truth. How can we trust what we cannot sense? Paul met Soren's steady gaze. I understand your concern, but my kind has lived. Without this gift for all our history, we have built trust through actions, through time, through proof, not instant knowing. Another counselor, a woman with pale silver hair, leaned forward. But that is your way. It is not ours. If more humans come, we will be surrounded by minds we cannot read. What will that do to our harmony? Alira stepped forward before Paul could answer. It will challenge us, yes. But perhaps challenges are not always harm. If we can learn to trust without empathy, we may grow stronger, not weaker. The council chamber filled with murmurs. Some nodded thoughtfully, others frowned. Soren raised a hand. Your Highness, I must speak plainly. You defend him because you wish for peace with his people. But peace must be built on safety. Without knowing his emotions, there is no safety. Paul kept his voice calm. Safety does not come from knowing everything about someone before they speak. It comes from understanding them over time. My being here is not to harm you. I'm here to learn about you, and for you to learn about us. Bren, who had been silent until now, added quietly, perhaps the problem is not the human's mind, but our own dependence on our gift. We have forgotten how to listen with our ears and see with our eyes. This drew silence from the chamber. Alira used the moment to end the meeting, saying more discussions would follow. After they left, Paul and Alira walked through a quiet corridor lined with tall windows. Outside, the sky was turning gold as the sun began to set. You spoke well, Alira said softly. But I fear they are not ready to accept your words. Some will try to keep you at a distance. I've been kept at a distance before, Paul replied. It doesn't stop me from doing what I came here to do. That evening, Alira invited Paul to a part of the city few outsiders had seen, the river market. Boats shaped like crescent moons floated on a wide, glowing river, carrying goods from all across Valaris. Vendors called out offers of rare fruits, woven crystal cloth, and floating lightstones. As they walked, Paul noticed people staring again. But this time, one brave young Valerian stepped forward, a boy of about 12. Commander Paul, he said politely, is it true you have no feelings? Paul crouched to meet his eyes. I do have feelings. I just don't share them in the way your people do. I smile when I'm happy, I frown when I'm sad, and I use words to tell people what I feel. That's how humans work. The boy tilted, his head. That sounds harder, Paul smiled. Sometimes it is, but it makes it special when someone understands you. It means they took the time to know you. The boy nodded slowly, then ran back to his family. Alira, who had watched the exchange, looked thoughtful. Perhaps that is the key. If my people see your actions, not just your unreadable mind, they might begin to understand. Paul agreed. Then I'll just have to give them something worth trusting. As night fell, The river lit up with drifting lanterns. Paul stood at the edge, watching their soft glow reflect on the water. He knew the whispers in the city would not fade quickly. The council's doubts would not disappear overnight. But somewhere, deep down, he also knew that trust, once earned, could be stronger than anything given instantly. And maybe, just maybe, Valaris was about to learn that lesson. A week after the council meeting, Paul was walking through the palace gardens when Bren approached him with a quiet urgency. "Commander," Bren said, glancing over his shoulder, "there is something I wish to show you. Something old. Something the council has not spoken of in many years." Paul followed the scholar through winding corridors and down a narrow stairway carved into the side of the palace's cliff. The air grew cooler as they descended. At the bottom, a stone doorway opened to a path that led outside, onto a rocky slope overlooking the sea. "This way," Bren said, leading him toward a small temple built into the cliff face. Its walls were worn smooth by centuries of wind. Strange symbols glimmered faintly in the stone, as if they still held a trace of light from the past. Alira was waiting at the entrance. "I asked Bren to bring you here," she explained. "There are things you must see for yourself." Inside, the temple was quiet except for the sound of the waves below. The walls were covered with carvings, rows of figures, their faces and hands raised in fear. Above them were tall, shadowy shapes with sharp angles and no visible eyes. "These are the Voresh," Bren said, his voice low. "They came to Valaris many ages ago. They were not like any others we had met. We could not feel them. Their minds were silent to us." Paul stepped closer, tracing the lines of one carving with his eyes. The figures of the Voresh looked unnatural, almost like living shadows. "What happened to them?" "They nearly destroyed us," Alira said. "Our people could not predict their actions. We could not sense their anger or their plans. Without our gift, we were confused and slow to react. The Voresh used this to their advantage, striking when we least expected." Bren pointed to another section of the carvings, showing a figure standing between the Valerians and the Voresh. This figure looked different, solid, human-like, but without the silver glow of the Valerians. "This is the prophecy of the silent mind," Bren said. "It tells of a time when one with a shielded mind would come. Such a being could either save Valaris or bring about its end." Paul stared at the image. "And you think that could be me?" Alira's voice was careful. "Some on the council fear it. Others wonder if it is only an old story. But when I met you, when I could not feel you, I thought of this carving." Paul frowned. "If the Voresh were like me and that you couldn't read them, it doesn't mean I'm the same as them. My people don't live by deception." "I believe you," Alira said. "But understand, our history teaches us to be wary of those we cannot sense. And if the Voresh still exist, your being here may not be coincidence." Bren gave a small nod. "The temple records suggest the Voresh were driven away, not destroyed. There are hints they might wait in the dark places between stars, seeking another chance to strike." Paul felt a weight settle in his chest. If this was true, and the Voresh could return, Valaris might once again face an enemy it could not predict. "Have you seen any sign of them since?" "Not for many generations," Alira said. "But there have been faint signals from the edge of our star system, unexplained readings. The council dismisses them as natural phenomena." Paul looked back at the carving of the silent mind. "If your people can't fight without your empathy, then you're vulnerable. And if the Voresh are out there, they'll know it." Alira met his gaze. "Then perhaps you can teach us another way, a way to fight even without our gift." They left the temple as the sky turned the color of molten gold. The sea below caught the light, scattering it in 1,000 directions. Paul walked in silence, thinking of the carvings, the prophecy, and the possibility that the Voresh were real. That evening, as Paul sat in his chamber, he heard a knock. It was Alira again, carrying a small crystal device. She placed it on the table, and a holographic map of Valaris's star system appeared. Small dots marked planets and moons. At the far edge, a pulsing red light flickered. "This is one of the unexplained signals," Alira said. "It came only 3 days ago." Paul studied it. "That's no random signal, it's patterned." "You think it's intentional?" "Yes," Paul said. "If it matches the kind of signals you've had before, it could be scouting activity. Someone is watching you." Alira's voice was steady but quiet. "If you are right, and if they are the Varesh, then Valaris is not ready." Paul leaned back, his mind already turning over plans. "Then we'd better get you ready." 3 nights after Paul saw the holographic map, the signal at the edge of the system grew stronger. It was no longer faint and random. It pulsed in a clear, repeating rhythm. Mira, the pilot of Aurora Dawn, came to Paul's chamber at dawn. "We've confirmed it," she said. "Multiple objects entering the system. They're not Valerian ships. Their formation is tight, military-like." Paul dressed quickly and went to the royal strategy room. Princess Alira, Bren, and several council members were already gathered around a large display. Red markers moved slowly across the star chart, heading toward Valaris Prime. Soren, the council member who had been most suspicious of Paul, spoke first. "We have sent a greeting signal. There is no response. Perhaps they are traitors?" Paul shook his head. "No traitor moves in formation like that. And if they were friendly, they'd have answered by now." Alira turned to the council. "We cannot risk ignoring this. We must prepare our defenses." Soren frowned. "Defenses? Valaris has not needed such things in centuries. Our gift allows us to sense danger long before it reaches us." As if in answer, the room's lights flickered. A sharp, cold feeling passed through the air, and Bren's eyes widened. "Do you feel it?" he whispered. One by one, the Valerians in the room exchanged looks of confusion and fear. Alira's hand trembled slightly. "I feel nothing. The room, it's empty." Paul understood immediately. "They're jamming you, blocking your empathy. This is exactly what happened in the old days, isn't it?" Bren nodded slowly, his voice tight. "The Varesh." Alarms sounded across the city. Guards ran through the halls, speaking in hurried tones. Without their empathy, they seemed unsettled, unsure of where to go or what to do. Paul stepped forward. "Listen to me. You can still fight. You just have to do it the human way, by listening to orders, following plans, and watching with your eyes, not your minds." Some looked doubtful, but Alira raised her voice. "You will follow him. He knows how to fight without our gift." Paul wasted no time. He called for Mira and 2 of her crew from Aurora Dawn to join him. "We'll set up a defensive perimeter around the capital. Bren, get me a map of the city and the palace. I need high points for lookouts." The Valerian soldiers were skilled, but they were used to relying on emotional signals to coordinate. Without that, they moved slowly at first. Paul broke them into small teams and assigned a human or a fast-learning Valerian to lead each one. Hours later, the first Varesh ships entered orbit. Their black hulls seemed to swallow the light around them. No windows were visible, only sharp edges and strange markings that looked like they had been carved into the metal. From the palace balcony, Paul and Alira watched as the ships descended. "They're testing your defenses," Paul said. "They'll start with small attacks before they bring in their main force." He was right. The first attack came from the sky, fast, dart-like ships that fired bursts of energy at Valaris's outer towers. Valerian pilots scrambled to respond, but without their empathy to guide them, their movements were clumsy. Paul got on the communicator. "Pull back to the inner line. Don't waste your ships on chasing them. Make them come to you." The Valerian pilots followed his orders, and the first wave ended with minimal damage. But the people of the city were panicking. Without their shared emotional sense, they felt cut off from each other. Parents clung to their children, unsure of what was safe. Merchants shut their stalls and locked their doors. Alira moved among them, speaking words of comfort, telling them to trust the guards and the humans working with them. Paul saw how her presence calmed them, even without her gift. By nightfall, the Voresh ships had landed on the far side of the city. Dark figures emerged, tall, angular, moving with a strange, gliding step. Their armor reflected no light. Paul gathered the defense leaders in the palace war room. He pointed to the map. "They'll hit here first, the old transport district. It's the fastest way to reach the palace. We'll set traps along this street, force them into narrow spaces, where their numbers won't help them." Soren, still wary, asked, "And if they break through?" "Then we fight them here," Paul said, tapping the palace's outer gates. "But we don't let them reach this point if we can help it." The Valerian fighters prepared as best they could. They placed barriers across the transport district and set up towers with energy projectors. Human crew members positioned themselves as spotters, shouting directions to the Valerians during the fight. When the Voresh came, they moved exactly, as Paul had predicted, fast and silent, in a single column. The first traps went off, collapsing parts of the street and forcing them into narrow alleys. Valerian defenders fired from above, hitting several before the rest scattered. Paul stood in the middle of the main street, giving orders. "Left side, 2. Coming in. Right tower, keep your fire steady." The Valerians, unused to this kind of shouted coordination, were slow at first, but soon they began to adapt. By the end of the night, the Voresh retreated, leaving several of their dark-armored warriors behind. It was only a small victory, but it proved something important. Valaris could fight without its gift, if guided by a different kind of strategy. After war. The battle. Paul walked with Alira along the damaged street. Fires burned in a few places, casting flickering light on the buildings. "You were right," Alira said quietly. "We can survive this, but only if we learn quickly." Paul looked toward the dark horizon, where the Voresh ships still hung like silent shadows. "They'll be back, and next time they'll hit harder." Alira's voice was steady. "Then we will be ready." The sun rose slowly over Valaris Prime, casting soft light over the battle-scarred city. Commander Paul stood on the palace balcony, watching soldiers prepare for the next attack. The calm was temporary. The Voresh would not wait long to strike. Again. Princess Alira joined him, her silver eyes clear and strong. "We must work together if we are to survive." Paul nodded. "Your people have great skill and courage, but they need a way to fight without relying on their gift. I will teach them what I know." Over the next days, Paul worked closely with the Valerian warriors. He gathered small teams made up of humans and Valerians who were willing to learn new tactics. They practiced communication without empathy, using radios, signals, and clear orders. Some Valerians found it difficult to trust commands given without feeling the leader's emotion. But Paul's calm voice and steady presence helped. He showed them how to watch each other carefully, to cover one another's blind spots. Alira fought alongside them, leading her people with quiet strength. Her belief in Paul inspired many. She learned to give clear instructions and to trust those around her, even when her natural senses were silent. One morning, Paul stood before a group of Valerian soldiers. "The Voresh want to break our city and our spirit," he said. "We will not let that happen. Together, we are stronger than any power that hides in silence." The soldiers cheered softly. It was the first time many of them had felt hope since the attacks began. That evening, the Voresh launched their largest assault yet. Ships darkened the sky, and thousands of shadowy warriors poured into the streets. Paul and Alira took their positions in the city's command center. Around them, radios crackled with reports. The teams they had trained moved quickly, setting traps, guarding key points, and pushing back the attackers. The fighting was fierce. Without their gift, Valerian soldiers relied on their training and each other's trust. Paul's leadership kept them focused. At one point, a group of Voresh warriors threatened to flank the defenders. Paul ordered a small team to move behind the enemy line and cut off their retreat. The team moved silently, guided by Paul's careful planning. Alira watched the battle from a nearby tower. She saw the courage in the eyes of the humans and Valerians fighting side by side. For the first time, she did not feel alone in this war, the turning point came when Paul led a charge through the narrow streets. "Now!" he shouted. "Push them back!" The defenders rallied, driving the Voresh out of the city center. Slowly, the shadowy figures retreated to their ships. After the battle, Paul and Alira walked through the quiet streets. The city was damaged but alive. "You have changed us," Alira said softly. "You showed us how to fight when our gift is gone." Paul smiled. "You had the strength all along. You just needed to believe in something new." Alira looked up at the stars beginning to shine. "We owe you more than words can say. But there is something else. I have come to understand you, not through your feelings, but through your actions and your heart." Paul felt a warmth in his chest. For the first time, he knew that despite their differences, they were connected. Together, they stood watching the horizon, ready for whatever might come next. The stars shone brightly over Valaris Prime, casting a calm light on the city that had seen so much in the past days. Commander Paul stood beside Princess Alira on the palace balcony. The air was warm, filled with the quiet sounds of the sea below and the soft hum of distant machines repairing the city. The great battle was over. The Voresh had retreated, their ships disappearing into the darkness beyond the stars. The city, though scarred, stood strong. And for the first time in a long time, hope filled the hearts of the Valerian people. Alira turned to Paul, her silver eyes reflecting the stars above. "We have learned much, Paul. Not only about war, but about trust and strength." Paul nodded. "Your people have great courage. It was easy to believe in you. You had to see that your gift, your empathy, is only one way to understand the world." Alira smiled softly. "You taught us that choice matters. That even without feeling every emotion, we can still stand together." The council had gathered that morning in the grand hall to honor the human delegation. Bren, the scholar, spoke of the ancient prophecy again. "The silent mind was not a curse, but a chance," he said. "It showed us that survival depends, not only on what we can sense, but on what we choose to believe." Soren, once the most doubtful council member, stood to address the room. "I was afraid at first," he admitted. "But Paul and his people showed us a new path. One of action, of trust built over time. We owe them our gratitude." Alira stepped forward to close the meeting. "Let this day mark the beginning of a new alliance. One where Valerians and humans stand side by side, not because we feel the same, but because we choose to protect each other." After the ceremony, Paul and Alira walked through the restored gardens. The floating flowers glowed softly in the evening light, and the city's peace had returned. "You no longer feel like a stranger here," Alira said quietly. Paul smiled. "Maybe I never was. Sometimes feelings come in ways we do not expect." Alira looked at him with a warmth that went beyond words. "I do not need to feel your emotions to know you, Paul. I see you in your courage, your kindness, your choices." Paul reached out and gently took her hand. "And I see you, Alira, a leader who is brave enough to change her world." The two stood together, united not by a gift, but by a promise to face whatever the future held, side by side. The stars above Valaris Prime seemed to shine brighter that night, as if welcoming a new dawn for both worlds.